last-minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. It's okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always as simple as 1, 2, 3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
What's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
You're listening to the Peak Physique Podcast with Andre Adams on the NASM Podcast Network.
Hey guys, welcome back to another exciting episode of the NASM Peak Physique Podcast. I'm your host, Andre Adams, NASM Master Trainer and IFBB Physique Olympian. Today we've got a special episode on the dot. This actually came from your votes on my Instagram recently, where we kind of ranked what you guys wanted me to talk about next. And today we're going to be doing a deep dive on nutrient partitioning. And this is a concept that maybe some of you guys are familiar with or looking for a refresh, but most importantly, looking for how can we leverage something like nutrient partitioning to achieve a very specific physique outcome. And we're going to dive right in by starting out with what is it? So a lot of people may not be familiar with this as well. And just kind of high level, nutrient partitioning is the process in which our body utilizes different macronutrients or different nutrients in general. It's really a concept that was first introduced into the sport of bodybuilding by a guy named John Perillo to explain why certain foods affect the ability for the body to store energy differently, right? So let's think about that. High level, all calories are not created equal. And if we have, let's say, 100 grams of sugar, carbohydrate versus 100 grams of oats or rice carbohydrate, they're going to do wildly different things inside of the body. And that's where we start to think about, this concept of nutrient partitioning and the way that different foods might affect different processes in the body. Nutrient partitioning is the process where hormones and chemical messengers or different signaling tells your body where energy should go and how excess calories should also be used, right? So if we're eating a caloric surplus and we have not burned off all those calories that we've consumed, this nutrient partitioning concept will help direct the body on where we're storing that energy or what processes that energy might be used for downstream. All right, and it's also called energy partitioning. So you guys may have heard of it referred to as energy partitioning. This is ultimately the process by which, again, your body is really converting different foods and nutrients into various systems and processes throughout the body. This primarily comes from your macronutrients. So that's going to be your proteins, your fats, carbohydrates, and your body's really going to do one of two things, right? It's kind of like thinking about anabolic versus catabolic. But your body's really going to either burn it off, these nutrients and these energy, or we're going to store it as some form of energy, be it muscle glycogen, or maybe it's, fatty tissue, adipose tissue in the body. Now, as we're talking about that out loud, it's very obvious to see why this would be important for bodybuilders, right? It's very vital that we control where our bodies are storing energy. Specifically, our goal is to push glycogen into the muscles and create that muscle fullness. We also want to pull in things like amino acids from the bloodstream into the muscles while mitigating excess fat stores or adipose tissue buildup in fat stores, right? And this is, by definition, the sport of bodybuilding, achieving a hard conditioned physique. Muscles are full and round, very little to no fat, and that's going to be the battle. So this is a very important concept, whether you're a coach or an athlete, or you're just working with clients that are looking to recomp and go through a transformation. We can start to utilize the benefits of something like nutrient partitioning. Meal timing, food selection, the amount of food we're consuming, exercise, all of these different variables impact nutrient partitioning due to, again, chemical messengers, timing, different signaling and mechanisms that happen within the body. A couple good examples of that might be things like protein synthesis, versus muscle protein breakdown, glucose and insulin response, right? These are different mechanisms that we can control or modify to enhance the effects of our diet and really focus on building muscle and burning fat tissue. Intense exercise certainly causes the secretion of special signaling molecules. There's one actually called interleukin-6, right? So that's going to be IL-6. This secretion not only encourages the body to use stored fat molecules for fuel during exercise, but it also increases the level of this molecule in the brain after exercise, which can give you kind of downstream benefits where the brain continues to direct calories consumed during that post-workout period, that called the anabolic window, into the muscles and away from the adipose tissue. So you get this kind of afterburn effect where the body continues this process and again is partitioning nutrients into very specific parts of the body. Insulin effects on nutrient partitioning is something that we also have to consider. Most bodybuilders are familiar with the effects of glucose and insulin, right? During that post-workout period, for example, we're generally looking for a very fast digesting carbohydrate, simple carbohydrate, and a very fast digesting protein like a hydrolyzed whey isolate, for example. So insulin is really a holding hormone with signaling to different parts of the body. Specifically in the sport of bodybuilding, we're looking to signal the muscle receptors. So post-workout, our body's in a catabolic state after that really intense, 1 to 2 hour hypertrophy training. And we need to flip that switch, put our bodies back into an anabolic state as quickly as possible. So when we have that post-workout shake, for example, or maybe we have a very high glycogen carbohydrate, the goal is really to spike glucose and ultimately insulin being that, again, holding hormone that's going to signal to the muscle receptors to open up and pull in all of those nutrients and amino acids from the bloodstream and start that recovery, that repair process. Right now, the downside, obviously, with it being a holding hormone, is that can also lead to fat storage, especially if we're, again, at a major surplus in calories, our timing's off, we're spiking glucose and insulin at random times throughout the day. This can definitely start to contribute to unwanted fat storage. Now, optimizing insulin sensitivity and timing is also crucial. And one thing to point out, actually just spoke about this past weekend at the NPC Women's Workshop with my good friend, Dr. Indy, who you've seen on this show. But there's a concept that we call insulin resistance, right? And that's basically your body is not able to utilize the benefits of glucose and insulin or optimize that process, we'll call it. And in this case, you're not going to see all those benefits and you're actually going to have trouble losing weight and you're going to be holding more body fat. So improving things like your insulin resistance, and I will get into a little deeper some supplementation and other ways we can combat this, but this is something you can actually test for on your HTMA mineral test, for example, right? If your chromium levels are very deficient and low, there's a few other parameters that we would check that could indicate insulin resistance. So just something to keep in mind. You want to leverage the effects of insulin to ultimately fill up those muscles and build muscle, improve recovery. And we want to avoid ultimately storing excess adipose tissue and fat. Guys, if you are just joining us, welcome back to the Peak Physique Podcast. Today, we're talking about leveraging the benefits of nutrient partitioning and really maximizing your physique outcome by understanding this concept. So we just touched on the effects of glucose and insulin. Let's talk about leveraging nutrient partitioning for general weight loss and muscle gain. And again, we would call that a recomp, right? Example, post-workout meal and nutrient partitioning process. We touched on it lightly. Let's go a little deeper. So again, we want to pair post-workout, fast digesting, high glycogen carbohydrate. Generally, we're going to pair that with protein isolate. And this is going to help maximize muscle protein synthesis. And the opposite of muscle protein synthesis is muscle protein breakdown. That's when your body's really catabolic, right? You're starting to use amino acids and convert that into energy and produce glucose in the body. So for us, again, the goal is flip that switch into an anabolic state as quickly as possible. We're going to be directing nutrients into the muscle stores signaling those muscle receptors, and then providing adequate levels of amino acids and other nutrients to help build muscle and really avoid fat storage. And again, the key there for understanding the concept is that intense hypertrophy training especially can significantly increase the effect of nutrient partitioning. So we talked about some of these processes being signaled from the diet, right? From the timing and the types of foods. But this is also generated from different physical activities such as hypertrophy training or intense resistance training in general. Similarly, cardio actually has a positive effect on nutrient partitioning. And we'll talk about the different energy systems we tap into when we're doing, walking versus, let's just call walking low intensity steady state. We'll call it LIST cardio versus moderate intensity steady state, or something like HIIT training, which more closely resembles the effects of resistance training on your central nervous system. Now, if we look at something like LIST or even MIS cardio, moderate to low intensity, you're really tapping into about 90% body fat for the fuel source, energy source, and about 10% glucose, versus something like HIIT where it's the opposite, right? We're talking roughly 90% glucose and ATP energy with very, we'll call it little fat specific usage. You're still burning more total calories, but a lower percentage of the overall calories burned are coming specific from body fat. So again, understanding the different energy sources and the type of cardio that we're implementing and the duration, we can start to leverage how our body is using these different nutrients and again, just help facilitate nutrient partitioning in general. Some supplements that I like to refer to, we talked a little on insulin resistance, so I'm going to start there. Natural supplements like berberine or One Level Up would be something like First Form's GDA, which also has amino acids, things like ALA. It's got chromium P in there as well, which is one of the first things that we're going to add to combat insulin resistance. These are all great things that will help facilitate nutrient partitioning by slowing the absorption of carbohydrates and glucose in the small intestines and allowing your body to use these macronutrients in a more desired way, right? We want to push those carbohydrates, glucose into the muscle, store it as glycogen, and again, inhibit fat storage from glucose and lipids in general. So GDA, berberine, chromium, my top three. Also, some people need to medicate, so they'll use something similar to berberine, which is the medication metformin, very similar function or mechanism in the body. And then let's talk about maybe some proteins, right? So again, if we want to control the rate of absorption or muscle protein synthesis, we can do something very fast digesting. For example, pre or post workout, we might use the isolate protein that's hydrolyzed and it's going to assimilate extremely quick, versus any other time of day we're replacing a meal, or maybe it's you want a slower digesting protein right before bed. Then we look at things like a whey concentrate, or even a casein or a protein complex where you get some slow, some intermediate, and some fast digesting proteins. So you're controlling the nutrient absorption and assimilation rate and how our body is able to use that energy and where ultimately it's going to get stored. All right, so proteins, another good one would be fat burners. So everyone's got their favorite fat burners. Some are natural, right? So stim-free, if we're thinking about energy producers like your B complex vitamins, L-carnitine, and CLA, for example, which are going to help convert different forms of macronutrients like fats or lipids and convert those into energy, or convert carbohydrates into energy, right? So these can definitely be beneficial in being specific and intentional about how we're using energy. And similarly, you can use lipolytic or high stim type fat burners that are increasing your core body temperature and also exhausting or converting some of that energy into heat, right? So there's different ways that we can utilize nutrients. There's also more advanced things for something like insulin resistance, such as the GLP-1s, right? So everyone's heard all of the different news on things like your Ozempic, semaglutides, or your dual GLP-1s, such as tirzepatide, right? It's also got that anti-inflammatory component. But GLP stands for glucagon-like peptides. And again, it's regulating the body's processes in utilizing glucose and ultimately affecting also the insulin response. So these are other medications that can be, implemented, therapies we'll call them, that can be implemented. And again, at the end of the day, any of these supplements are really just facilitating nutrient delivery and energy usage throughout the body. Some things to avoid: make sure, just like any other good, clean diet, we want to make sure we're avoiding negative partitioning agents. Some of those would include things like fast foods, which are high in saturated fats. Certainly want to avoid trans fats, simple sugars, or highly sugary soft drinks and beverages, highly processed foods, and really just focus on sticking with, good whole foods. You want lean proteins. You want to stick with your complex carbohydrates or high resistant starches, right? These are going to be good, again, for controlling rate of assimilation in the body. Dietary fiber, right, from fruits and veggies, and really just eating purposefully and with intention. And this is going to help you get the most out of nutrient partitioning and really build that framework, right? Your overall framework is going to be having good eating habits. It's going to be regularly exercising and getting some form or fashion of cardiovascular exercise throughout the week. Guys, that's all I've got for you this week on nutrient partitioning. Highly recommend researching this further and starting to incorporate these concepts into your daily routine, whether it's for yourself or for some of the clients you work with. You guys can always find me online at www.andreadamsofficial.com. We've also got our lifestyle coaching at teamadamsprep.com. And Instagram and YouTube is andreadams_official. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the Peak Physique Podcast. We'll see you next time.